Hey guys, Tomboy61, and today we have another installment in our series of Best and Worst. Today's episode is Best and Worst British Tier 6 Cruisers. We're going to be covering all of them. If you haven't been around for a Best and Worst, basically what we do is first, we have all of the stats of the ships put into a wonderful spreadsheet. Ships get plus 2 points if they're the best in something, plus 1 point if they're the second best, minus 2 points if they're the worst, and minus 1 point if they're the worst in select categories. We then tally up all of those, add them together, and it should give us some sort of mathematical proof as to what ship is actually the best or worst. But obviously, then that isn't always giving us the best answer. So then I also give my opinion on what ships are the best and worst. Some notes for this one: the stats are a bit different than how we would usually do them for best and worst. Best and worst, we used to just do flat stats without any commander inspirations. But I felt like because the commanders affect these ships so much, we should use the commander stats. So for reference, on the heavy cruisers, so that's Cheshire and Surrey, we are running William 10. On Fiji, we're running Reginald Tyrwhitt. On Belfast, we are running Azurlane Belfast. And on Tiger 59, we are running Hot Rod. I'll have those builds up for you guys to see. Those are the ways I like to play those ships, so that is the way that we recorded that stat. So with all of that said, without further ado, let us get into the rankings of best and worst by the numbers. And the best ship by the numbers, this one surprised me, is Cheshire. Yeah, Cheshire, the premium heavy cruiser, one that is a down-tiered Albemarle, essentially, has the highest hit points of any of these ships, 42,500, and some of the thickest armor values, 13 minimum and 178 maximum. Only a 16 millimeter bow, which it will get beat out by like things like Tiger 59, but the thickest deck armor at 30 millimeters. Also has the second highest torpedo reduction at 19%. Its 3 two-barreled guns, well, they are the biggest of any of these ships, 234 millimeters, with the longest firing range at 14.9 kilometers, which really isn't that much better because the worst is only 14.7. Now, for these big guns, it does have the worst reload time and the worst shells per minute at only 23, but it does make up for that with massive HE damage, the highest at the tier, 3,850, with a 24% chance to set fire, also the highest of any of these ships. Its AP damage, also the highest of any of these ships, 5,750, but because of that relatively low shells per minute, it has the lowest DPM when it comes to AP damage, and that's 132,250. Its secondaries, it does have 8 two-barreled 114 millimeter secondaries with a range of 4.5 kilometers, which is middle of the road for these ships. Reload time of them, 3 seconds, which is average. Highest damage, though, 1,600, and a 7% chance also to set fire, which is also the highest. Torpedoes, kind of middle of the road for the torpedoes on these ships. 2 four-railed 533 millimeter torpedoes with a reload time of 96 seconds and a damage of 15,433. Detectability range on those torpedoes, 1.3. Torp speed is 61 knots and a range of 8 kilometers. In the with a range of 8 kilometers. And pretty much all the ships share this. The only weird thing is because I have Tyrwhitt on the Fiji, my Fiji stats for the torps are a bit higher just because, well, he's a destroyer commander that we've put on a cruiser, and destroyer commanders tend to, affect torpedoes because that's one of their main armaments. The highlight of Cheshire, and the one that I would always say is the reason it performs so well in most, or is the main reason you'd want this ship, is its AA. It shares 6-kilometer range with things like Tiger 59, but it absolutely packs a punch when it comes to damage. It's, I think, the highest damaging AA at the tier, 142 damage per second at minimum, and it goes up to 518. It will shred through ships. Finally, or not finally, but maneuverability on Cheshire, max speed 37.5 knots, which is the highest speed, but this is most likely thanks to our build with Lieutenant. Turning radius is the worst at 720 meters, and a rudder shift time of 5.7 seconds, the best of any of the ships, but once again, that is up to our Tenant build. Then it does have the worst concealment of any of the ships, 11.5 kilometers. Detectability by air, detectability by sea is 11.5 kilometers. Detectability by air is 6 kilometers. And when firing in smoke, 7.2 kilometers, which is the worst of any of these ships. And I have to say, Cheshire I like, but I don't love. It's mid-tier for me. It is not the best, but it's good to see that it is coming up on top and it gets some recognition, though for me it usually falls just in a little bit of the lower tiers, just because the armor on it tends not to really hold up, and you end up getting punished way too hard in this ship. It is a very difficult ship to play, especially when you are up tiered. From the best ship, according to the numbers, to the worst ship, and that's the Tiger 59. The second lowest HP of any of these ships, 33,100. Armor thickness is between 13 and 101 millimeters maximum, and that 101 maximum is the worst maximum armor thickness of any of the ships, though it does have the best bow armor at 25 millimeters, which is battleship grade deck armor, or bow armor, and its deck armor is the second best at 27 millimeters. Torp reduction on the ship is only 4%, and it has the least number of barrels at only 4 with its two-barreled guns. They are the 152s that is shared across pretty much all of the light cruisers as far as caliber goes, though it does have the lowest range, the quickest reload of any of the ships at 3.2 seconds, but because of its few and far between guns, it only gets 75 rounds per minute. 180 time on those guns, 4.5 seconds. And now we get into some of the stats that we see where it really does get hurt, and the reason it probably ended up as the worst. First, it doesn't have HE, much like the Fiji and most of the other ships of the line. It does not have HE shells. Its AP damage is only 3,200, which is second worst at the tier, and its damage per minute is 240,000, which puts it right in the middle as far as DPM goes among these ships. Next up, and this is probably why it ended up down here, because it doesn't have secondaries or torpedoes, it receives straight zeros and pretty much -1 points for categories like secondary range, secondary reload, secondary damage, secondary fire, torpedoes, reload time, damage, detectability, torp speed. All of those categories it received a -1 on because it doesn't have them. So that's likely why it is so far down in these rankings. But it understands, because this ship doesn't have utility like torpedoes, and it needs to be punished in the rankings for that. AA, well, it does okay here, but not that great. It has the second best AA range at 6, but it does have the worst minimum damage of any of the AA at 47, and the second worst max or overall AA at only 165 damage per second. Max speed on the vessel, it is the slowest of all these ships at 31.5 knots. Turning radius, it matches it with Fiji at 590 meters, and a rudder shift time of 6% or 6 seconds, which puts it right in the middle. And then as far as concealment goes, it is tied for the best, 9.4 by sea, 5.3 by air, and 5.4 when firing in smoke. And those are all the stats of Tiger 59. Tiger 59, I don't think it's the worst, but it is definitely not the best. I think it is a ship that I've grown to love and I really enjoy, and I'd put it actually in the upper bits, but I totally understand why it got so low, just because it doesn't have the utility and the access to the utility that a ton of the other ships do have on here, and therefore it does get punished fairly hard. Next, let's talk about what I think is the best ship, and it's the one I think has the most versatility, and it's actually the one that kind of finished middle of the road, and that's Belfast. I don't think you can go wrong with Belfast. Middle of the road, or second best HP, middle of the road when it comes to armor for these ships, middle of the road when it comes to its main battery, but you get into things like shells per minute. It has the highest shells per minute of any of these ships. It has HE, giving it the highest DPM when firing HE at 207,900. It has the highest DPM when firing AP at 322,245. It has okay secondaries. They're kind of middle of the road. 4 2-barreled 102mm guns. Range on those is 5.2 kilometers. Reload 3 seconds. Damage 1,500 and a 6% chance to set fire. Its Achilles heel and its one big weakness, of course, is the fact that it does not have torpedoes, so you do kind of have to play Belfast a little bit back, but you do get that utility in the fact that it does have radar. AA range, it's middle of the pack, but it's okay. 5 kilometer damage, second best minimum damage at 72, and middle of the road when it comes to max damage. Max speed of the vessel, 33.5 knots. Turning radius, it's not the best, 680 millimeters, and has the slowest rudder shift time of any of these ships at 7.2 seconds. Finally, the concealment is middle of the road for these ships, 9.4 kilometers. It's in the upper tiers, but some of the others get it into its middle. So 9.4 kilometers for detectability by sea, which is tied with Tiger. 5.9 kilometers detectability by air, which is middle of the road, and 4.7 while firing in smoke. And remember, that's with Belfast equipped, which is reducing that smoke fire penalty to begin with. So it's middle of the road, but I think Belfast overall delivers the best package at all, if you know what I mean. I think it's the best of everything combined. And then finally, what I think is the worst of the Tier 6 British battleships is going to be Surrey, but even then, I do have a soft spot for Surrey. I just think it's not Devonshire, and it's not Albemarle, and it kind of suffers for being that Tier 6 wonky sort of ship. So Surrey, middle of the road for HP, 35,300. Armor thickness, 6 millimeters, which is the lowest as far as a minimum armor thickness of any of these ships. Middle of the road when it comes to max armor thickness at 152 millimeters. Bow armor, low at 16 millimeters. Deck armor, okay, maxing out at 27 millimeters, and has the best torpedo reduction of any of these ships at 22%. Main battery has 4 2-barrel 203 guns, so second best as far as size of guns and therefore some armor penetration. Firing range 14.8 kilometers, which is middle of the road. Second worst reload time at 12.5 seconds, giving you only 38 shells per minute. 180 time on the go, 17. It does have HE, which is nice and it can be useful. 3,300 damage from the HE. DPM 125,400, which gives it second best HE, but that's only because you're comparing it against things like Fiji and Tiger, which don't have HE. 17% chance to set fire, which is decent. AP damage is 4,500, and that gives it the second worst AP damage at 171,000. Secondaries, it gives you 6 2-barreled 102mm guns with a firing range of 5.2 kilometers. Reload time on it is going to be 3 seconds. Damage on it 1,500, and a 6% chance to set fire. Torpedoes, it does have the usual kind of British torps, 2 4-barreled 533s, kind of shares it with Cheshire, though it does do slightly more damage than Cheshire at 15,867 compared to the 15,433 that you see on Cheshire. Reload time on them 96 seconds, detectability 1.3 kilometers, torp speed 61 knots, and a range of 8 kilometers. AA range is only going to be 5 kilometers. It has the second worst minimum AA damage at only 56 damage per second, but it does have the second best overall at 250 damage per second. Maneuverability, 33.1 knots with a turning radius of 660 meters and a rudder shift time of 5.9 seconds. The second best of these ships, but that's up to Tennant. And then finally, it's kind of middle of the road when it comes to the concealment, 9.6 kilometers by sea, 5.9 by air, and 6.4 when firing in smoke. And by far, Surrey isn't the worst ship in the world. It's just, if you told me I had to go out and play a match and these were my 5 choices, Surrey would be my last pick, unfortunately. I like it as a ship, but I just think it doesn't hold a candle to things like Tiger and Belfast and Cheshire. So yeah, guys, that is my best and worst. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. If you liked the video, go ahead, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. See ya.